Let's see, we're documenting this just to document it. I'm making drawings here in SolidWorks. This is the original 1899 version of the axle bearing assembly. And this is actually upside down. This will all go in this direction when it's in place. They have a replaceable bearing. It sets in there. And you can, as you look at this, you see the curve that comes down and straight. It's a little bit misguiding when you actually get to in looking at it more, inspecting it further. There's a ½ inch of flat on each side. So they have this bottom curve is not all curved to this point. This originally intersects right at the middle of the axle, and this is made for a 3 3/8 diameter is apparently the original. And what they did was they offset center between this outside where it sets and the inside by ½ inch. So they're figuring that this can wear a ½ inch before they would need to replace it. It would have consistent thickness all the way down to a ½ inch of wear. These set on the top, the axle underneath, and you know, they did not make a full round on the bearing. They figured gravity would work and hold everything down. We weren't going super fast. We're just rolling along. Has an oil hole in here. Interesting thing that I was noticing, they drilled a hole through for the oil. That's 3/8 hole. And then part of this looks like it may have been with a shaper in here. And they did a 1/4 inch cutout to each side for oil. But it also looks like the final finishing was with a hand chisel. So again, this was 1899, so it's a little while back. The bolts, which are all bent up here, but appear to have standard centers where this would line up from one piece to the next. However, the pinning, they also pin these with copper rods. Those are just hand drilled. Those are totally erratic from side to side. There's some other little guides that fit inside of here, and I'm going to do more looking at this later. This is the newer version, which this one's broken, and I don't know when they changed to the one-piece version, but this originally also was a replaceable bearing, and this replaceable bearing would have been the same as that one. The housing being in one piece instead of two for this bearing saddle, but the actual insert would have been the same. They just would have slid it in from the sides. And then this one also has copper pins to hold it. Now, I was looking at this and I was really thinking goofy for a little bit. I was saying, wow, this is one of those pieces that, you know, a CNC machine might make it a little easier, but it still would be. And Austin looked at it real quick and he said they'd use a shaper. And yes, that's what they would have used. So to get this straight with the curve underneath there, they would have just came in with a formed tool on a shaper and came straight back and forth and cut the underneath, which would be the same thing for the sides on this multi-piece one. I imagine looking at this, the further back you go with cast iron, the more of a problem that they had with breakage. And this probably was made in multi-piece so that it could move just a little bit more and not break, well, the way this one here did. Although that's a fairly new, it's showing a little bit of rust and stuff at this point, but I think they probably broke that taking it apart. I don't think it broke from operation. It doesn't show any signs of fretting where the fracture is. So I think that most likely broke when they took it apart. And yeah, so just, we're not going to make those. We will be making one of these newer models, which they got 4 complete replacement ones. But we'll make one of them to replace the one that is totally worn out. As long as we had the stuff here and it's nice to truly document what it was, as near as we can tell. So that's why I'm doing that. These grooves here for the oil for the bearing box to slide up and down too. I don't know if you can see it with the light. Anyway, those were hand chiseled in there, an X and a couple of tapered lines here. And yeah, handwork. Since Bert was asking, we were talking about the locomotive designations. And the number 1 down at Pioneer Park is a 040. That means it has 0 leading wheels or steering wheels at the front, guide wheels. Pilots, that's the correct name. It has 0 pilot wheels. So that's the front is the pilot. It has 4 driving wheels. So that's the second part of the designation. And then trailing wheels. You'd have trailing wheels if you had extra weight for a larger boiler or something that might be on a locomotive. Now in this case, they have a tender that they pull, and you can step back and forth between the two, but the tender is its own trailer. It does not work on the same frame. So the locomotive, and that's real common that a tender will be close coupled with a locomotive, but you have the designation for the locomotive is strictly the wheels that are on it. And when you get into the really big ones, you will have some of them mentioning a double set of drivers. So they might have a 4 dash, well, normally you'd have like a 4 dash, say 4-6 dash 2 or whatever, so that you've got 6 drivers. But on the really big ones, you'd have 2 sets of 6 in the middle. And the reason that they're 2 sets of 6 is because you have each one is designated as a set of drivers because it has a individual steam cylinders to run it. So each one that's a steam cylinder would be another designation in between. I'm not the guru on locomotives, but I have been around them a little bit. You know, there's a lot of people, if you're really interested, there's a lot of guys on YouTube that have a lot of locomotive stuff. And I don't know how much they have, but the 557, I hope I got that number right, that they're doing in Wasilla. Anyway, they're doing a restoration on a locomotive, and the people here at Engine 1 and at, I think it's 557. We could look that up real quick, and then I could refilm whatever the number is supposed to be. In Wasilla, they share information quite a bit, but that one will be an excursion locomotive. It actually belongs to the Alaska Railroad, but there's a non-profit that will be running it. And they're got it just about restored. They may have it this next year even out there on the tracks, where you can go along and take an excursion. Cool. It's a little bigger than the number 1. It's standard gauge, and it's got a few more tons. So we'll put a link to the 557 group in case you're interested in what they're doing with the restoration. Maybe you want to donate some money. In fact, I'm sure they can always use a few more dollars, even though they're getting close to having it going. They still need operating money. And good group, and we'll put some links to them down below this.